This is a Republican strategy for free market private health insurance. Did you know a recent Wall Street Journal survey showed healthcare as the #1 issue on voters' minds going into the 2020 election? Did you know that a recent AP poll found that on healthcare, voters favored Democrats 40% to 27%? It's time Republicans get to know more and learn more about healthcare. 175 million Americans access healthcare through private health insurance. The difference between healthcare and health insurance is that healthcare are the services that you get from your doctors and hospitals. Private health insurance is how you finance or pay for the care that you get from doctors and hospitals. 94% of Americans are satisfied with their private employer-sponsored health insurance. Employers pay a significant part of the premiums. They pay 74%, almost 3/4 of the premiums for singles and 70% for families. 71% of Americans prefer private health insurance over any kind of government program. And you hear in the news a lot about Medicare for all. Well, support for Medicare for all drops from 56% to 26% when voters are informed of treatment delays, high costs, and increased taxes that other countries have to suffer through when they have a program that's government controlled like Medicare for all. So be sure that you know and understand the issues around what will change the dynamics when your opponents start to talk about Medicare for all. What kind of future do you want? Well, let's take a look at a classic 4-panel grid. Private insurance on the top, government insurance on the bottom. Now, what if we have Democrat control? Under Democrat control, we're likely to move to what I would call Obamacare 2.0. That is, there will be increased federal subsidies for people buying their insurance through the government exchanges. There'll be more government regulations on private health insurance. There'll be more expanded Medicaid eligibility requirements. Instead of 138% of the poverty level, it can go to 150 or 200% of the federal poverty level with more government subsidies for people under Medicaid. And of course, there'll be more restrictions on private health market coverages. Of course, what Democrats really want is complete government control. So they've talked about Medicare for all, which all presidential candidates seem to be supporting on the Democratic side. And they really like a single payer system where everybody in the healthcare system becomes an employee of the federal government. Now, what happens if Republicans take control? Well, maybe this is the future you should really be talking about, because it's not a matter of which one's going to happen. One of them will happen. And if Republicans control, we can repeal and replace Obamacare finally. Large employer groups, they need some regulatory relief. There's some stuff in the Obamacare that's really hurting large employers and threatening them with higher taxes. Small employer groups have been hurt the worst. They really need lower premiums. They need to have more options for coverages. They need to have more capability to use savings accounts, health reimbursement arrangements, health savings accounts, those sorts of things that large employers have been able to implement for many years now. Individuals, they really want guaranteed coverage of pre-existing conditions. Of course, everybody wants the pre-existing conditions, and that can be true under both large employer, small employer, and new programs for individuals. And of course, for those who are in greatest need, those with impaired health, they need a program to go into that will provide a health support program for their needs so that they can recover, hopefully, but at least they can stabilize whatever condition they have. This would not be the old-fashioned high-risk pool. It would be an entirely different concept, and I'll show you how we can do that in a few minutes. Of course, government controls, government insurance is still there, and under Republican control, we can move towards more flexible government options. Medicare Advantage, Medicaid block grants to states, children's health insurance plan options, TRICARE, VA options, federal employee health benefit options, all those things can be developed in a more flexible way, giving more choices and options under existing government programs. So which way are we going to go? The 2020 elections will decide in which direction this country will go. It's up to you as Republicans to learn more about healthcare. Take that issue away from the Democrats. We've got every other issue, but don't expect the economy and unemployment rates being so low to carry the day. Democrats won 2018 elections mostly on health care promises, and the public believed them and put them in charge of the House. We've got to win that. So how do we get from here to there, to the private health insurance coverage? Well, my suggestion is to keep it simple. Focus on the biggest problems first, that is the 175 million people in employer-sponsored group plans and individual policies. This is the biggest voting bloc that has a major concern about whether or not their pre-existing conditions are going to be covered, whether their employer premiums are going to go up because employers have mandates, requirements on them. So let's focus on that. Yes, the other coverages of Medicare and Medicaid need reform. I suggest keep that separate, because if you try to do that in an election year especially, you'll be demagogue that you're throwing grandma over the cliff and you're hurting the poor. So here's an example of a private free market health insurance system. I call it MAGA Health. MAGA Health will focus on the 4 areas where we can really have a big impact. It's totaling about 200 million people. The large employer-sponsored plans, the small employer-sponsored plan, individual policies for those people who are uninsured, and then the uninsureds that have no policies whatsoever. There's about 28 million of those. So Medicare, Medicaid, the TRICARE VA system, let's keep those separate. So what is MAGA Health all about? Well, there's 3 options. You either get coverage directly from an insurer, you're provided a certificate of guaranteed coverage if you are rejected, but you really are insurable. And the third option is you're going to be accepted into a subsidized impaired health support coverage. So let's look what the model really looks like. An application for insurance, let's take an example going to 3 different companies, A, B, and C. What will happen is that statistics show us that about 88 to 89% of applications are accepted by insurers. So that's number 1. Number 2, as we move towards that, those policies that are, those applications that are not accepted, put into this rejected lives category. What will happen with those? They will go to a semi-government private combination health review authority, which will look at those, and most of those lives typically are insurable. They just were rejected for reasons that we're not always certain about, or they're arbitrary. There's no standard for what the insurance companies are using to apply for accepting. So somebody else will oversee that, this health review authority. And if they are truly insurable, they will be given a certificate of guaranteed coverage. About 8 or 9% additional people would be given a certificate of guaranteed coverage, which means they can go back to any of those companies, A, B, and C in this example, and A, B, and C would be required to offer them coverage at standard or near standard rates, covering any and all pre-existing conditions. That's item number 2. Item number 3 is about only 2 or 3% of the population is truly uninsurable. They will go into an impaired health support group. That is not, again, the old-fashioned high-risk pool. It is an entirely different concept where we're actually providing all the benefits and services that anyone would need who's got a persistent chronic condition or some catastrophic illness, whether it's cancer, heart disease, brain injury, burn victims, whatever it is. That would be the third option. And so you're going to get one of these 3. It'll be guaranteed issue and coverage of any and all pre-existing conditions. So if you want health insurance, you will get health insurance under one of these 3 options. Nobody's going to mandate you have to go these 3, but you will have the option to take one of these 3. If you want more details on how MAGA Health really works, you can find it at www.magahealth.net.